Welcome back to the AI Driven Marketer. I'm Dan Sanchez. My friends call me Danchez. And in this episode, I'm actually doing a replay of a guest appearance I had on the Business of Storytelling podcast with Christoph Trapp. And I talked about a number of different ways that you can use AI to do better storytelling in your business from a strategic level to practical levels. And I even spent a lot of time talking about why the new ChatGPT o1 preview is a fantastic new model available to marketers in order to make these kinds of things happen. So without further ado, I'm going to now tap play on that episode for you to watch and listen to.
Hey, business storytellers. How's everyone doing? Episode 670, actually. We had a cancellation this week or a reschedule. That's fine. We're just rolling with the punches around here. Last episode in this studio, next time you'll see me, I think things are going to look different. I might go back to these sound panels, which you can get on Amazon, my Amazon storefront, by the way, Christoph Trapp on Amazon. You'll find me. But I got some different ones. So we will see if I like them, if I still sound as good as I can. Maybe I won't, who knows. But today, we're going to be talking to the AI-driven marketer. Now, if that's not a title and a website, you can check it out right there below, AI-drivenmarketer.com. Dan Sanchez ran across him somewhere on some podcast, and I thought, interesting topic. I think it was about podcasting, on how to use AI in podcasting. We'll make it a little bit broader today and talk about how do you implement AI-powered storytelling. And we're not talking about delving, into crap. We're talking about how do you use it to still tell your unique story and, of course, align it with the customer journey. Dan, welcome to the show.
Man, thanks for having me on. This is awesome. I'm excited to talk about this topic. And I feel like this topic was just made even more possible by ChatGPT's new release that came out last week. So when I saw the show coming up, I'm like, oh, this is going to be good because what's available right now, I think is changing the game for storytelling specifically. So I'm excited to jump into it.
Let's jump into it, but carefully. I have a new hip, so I'm not allowed to jump or run anymore. But I'm not going to get up anyways, my friends. So, let's talk about what the update is, because there's updates all the time, and it's actually quite difficult, in my opinion, to keep up on what matters, what doesn't matter, how do I implement it, does it work, why was this update to ChatGPT so important, and what is it to this discussion?
So there's minor updates all the time with all the AI platforms, and they're constantly like neck and neck, and they're constantly showing their new test results of like, oh, now Claude's slightly better than ChatGPT, and now ChatGPT, oh, Google take a little. It's like a game of inches, and every once in a while, one will overtake. OpenAI has kind of been the front runner ever since they launched ChatGPT, right? But they did just launch something new that is very exciting, and their naming convention of it is horrible, but at the end of the day, when I play with it, I'm seeing nothing but great results from it. You have to be a paid user of ChatGPT, so you got to be paying the $20 a month. Sorry for my free user friends, but this one's behind the gated wall, and you're only allowed to use it 50 times a week, which for me is enough. And I use AI a lot, but for power, I guess superpower users, it's not quite enough sometimes. But this new version called o1 Preview is exciting because it's the first model that has reasoning ability baked into it. I think we've all had the experience with AI where it's like it just stumbles over something simple. Like it can do algebra, yet it can't count. What the heck? It can do complex strategy work sometimes, but yet it can't seem to understand the mechanics of some simple things. And trying to understand the boundaries of what AI can and can't do made it easy for people like me who specialize in it in order to get the most out of it, but made it hard and sometimes unapproachable to figure out what AI is actually capable of. But this new o1 Preview model makes it easy because it actually reasons through what you're asking it for a few seconds or sometimes a whole minute before it actually delivers the output. So yes, it's slower, but slowness is actually a feature here because it's taking time to think about it before it responds to you. Let me give you an example. Even if you do something like ask it for a typical thing you might do a Google search for. Like I live in Nashville. There's a lot of cool things to do in Nashville, right? It's a music city. But let's say I wanted to do something different. I wanted to ask it like, hey, what are some fun things to do that are off the beaten path and child friendly? A previous model might have struggled to figure that out. It would have done okay. But this time it'll actually take 7, 10, 15 seconds to think like, okay, looking through the initial list, vetting for what's off the beaten path, checking to see if it's careful, if it's free, if it's appropriate for children to participate, compiling a final list, and then delivering the results. Very different than how all AI models currently do it, which is just jump to answering the results. Whether they're right or wrong, it's actually checking itself now. And that slowness, that reasoning ability changes a lot of things for AI. And I think especially for storytelling.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, I use Claude. I'm a Claude user for the most part, and I say things like, "Are you sure? Did you make anything up? How do you know that? How do we know that? How does that align with the project?" They now have projects. That's actually very nice. Like for ChristophTrapp.com or even the podcast, I say, "Here's what the podcast is about. Here's kind of the tone for articles. Here's what we do, blah, blah, blah. What questions should I ask Dan?" I don't even write questions down, but if I were to, right, like that's what I
Yep.
would do on there. Here's what Dan does and whatnot. But let's talk about AI powered storytelling. Now, my strong opinion, and maybe if you disagree, I mean, we can hash that out, virtual arm wrestle here if you like to. But people just going to Jasper or AI Writer and they just say, write me an article on AI powered storytelling, and then they get whatever they get. I don't think that's how you use AI at all. And I think that's a waste of time. It's not my unique story. It's never going to be my unique story. Now, can I get some ideas that way? Sure. But what does that mean? AI powered storytelling, and how do we do it while we're still being unique with our story?
I find that the key is feeding it the right information, right? I mean, it has
Yep.
been and it continues to be the key to getting good outputs out of AI from a marketing content, especially a content marketing standpoint, right? You can't just be like, write me an article about this thing my buyers care about. It's going to give you a vanilla article. It's going to suck. There's not much you can do about it. Now, I will say the O1 preview does a lot better because, again, it's thinking. You're like, if you're writing an article for this, it will actually think to itself like, "Hey, what's the target what's the target audience of this?" And therefore, it will write a better article because even without you telling it what the target audience is, it's probably going to think about it in the thought process like a good writer would. But even if you assign a great writer just write a generic topic, it's probably not going to be that good without like some significant research to put into it. Hence, we all go to Google and go to very notable, no, like known websites, and we find we have well written articles written by somebody who's never done the thing, right? I did a search for how to vlog like a few months ago, and Mailchimp spit out an article on vlogging 101, and I could tell as somebody who's picked up a camera and run around like Casey Neistat vlogging before that article was written by somebody who's never ever picked up a camera, has never done, has no, probably doesn't even follow any vlogs on YouTube. That's a disaster. And so AI has the same problem that humans do in that it needs original content, it needs thought leadership, it needs data, it needs expertise, it needs your experience in order to craft the stories. So if you can feed it the raw material, its ability to manipulate it and put out something very quickly is really good. One that I was doing recently that I'd like to leave here and challenge some people with is using it to come up with a company's strategic narrative, right? That's storytelling at a strategy level within the organization. It's very difficult to do. Andy Raskin made that very popular in the B2B space a few years ago. And I remember sitting down when I was the director of marketing for Sweetfish Media. It's a large B2B podcasting agency. And we wrestled for hours, days, even weeks over the strategic narrative, going back and forth with each other. Like, what's the old way versus the new way in the industry? How do we introduce the solution without talking about our product or service? How do we adjust to it? And we studied it and we looked at it. Now with O1 Preview, I was literally just on Sunday putting in a very generic prompt. I said, write an Andy Raskin style strategic narrative for the podcast agency Sweetfish Media. Make sure it speaks to the needs of B2B marketers and incorporates a strong narrative that differentiates the company from its competitors and substitutes. What it gave me back, I'm like, oh, I wish I would have had this a couple of years ago when we were working on this because it was good. Was it the perfect first draft? No, it went off on a kind of a tangent of conversational marketing, but still overall what it put out was very strong for a strategic narrative that I could then use to build the website or come up with other messaging and narrative pieces of content for the agency. Now, because it took 10 seconds to think, it's actually taken the time to evaluate Andy Raskin style, formulate the strategic narrative. I'm like reading down the thought process because it actually gives you a little drop down of its thinking before it writes. It's very helpful to see how it's embracing it. The strategies involve shifting market dynamics and leveraging podcast power. Is it like the bullet points for its thought process before it spit out a strategic narrative that looks relatively good? And of course, you can come back and be like, that's a great start, but make it a little bit more fun. Sweetfish is this fun company. And also, the positioning is less around conversational marketing and more around being a personality driven brand in order to connect with buyers emotionally. And so it did that and actually came up with a great rough draft that I'm like, I wish I would have had this to start from because it's so smooth. And tweaking from there is the name of the game when it comes to storytelling. I feel like AI's ability to come up with a good rough draft for starters, especially with its ability to reason now, is at an all time. It just puts us in a different place. We are no longer having to start with blank pages ever. We can now just be editors, curators, if you will.
Yeah, what's interesting to me about that when you were talking about the strategic planning, I was thinking about the old days, right? Now I'm showing my age here. Like you're in a conference room or wherever, or a retreat at the library or wherever, somewhere fancy. And you would put post-it notes on the
Yeah.
walls where it's like, let's think about it. Let's think about it. And now you can just say, hey, what are the different aspects of a strategic plan that I really need to discuss, right? Like, boom, there's your template or whatever.
Yep.
And then you're like, okay, here's what you know about me already. What pieces should we incorporate? Boom. It's not going to be close or, but it's going to be a good start, right? And I think a lot of people forget about that. I found somebody, a high-ranking person, second episode in a couple of weeks where I talk about the U.S. Postal Service. I was trying to reach a high-ranking person. I was just like, okay, what's the process for me to do this? And they said, you have to appeal it here and here and here to the district manager and whatever. And so I didn't get to the district manager, but I got to somebody pretty close because I was following that process in actually Perplexity, right? And then I called and she said, well, that's not me. And I said, well, it still got me pretty close, right? So like you have to keep in mind it's not always correct. But when it comes to storytelling, so now you have the strategy in place, I use AI for all kinds of different things, including the cutting up of the episode, right? Today, we'll throw
Yep.
that into Opus Clips. We'll get some clips that we'll use on YouTube, LinkedIn, blah, blah, blah. I'll use Otter to transcribe it, right, in a couple of seconds. I think those are probably the main things. I use Claude to get some other ideas. Okay, what are some things Dan and Christoph talked about that I didn't even think about early on that I could now write about, in addition to the actual topic that we declared initially. But what are some other ways that you would recommend people use AI in their storytelling?
Absolutely. So I think some easy ways are looking at what are the stories going on in your business all the time. Think of case studies, customer testimonials, maybe even your founder story. Sometimes it's hard to get them drafted unless you're working with a professional writer that specializes in storytelling. You're like it's hard to get them down. You write it doesn't feel right. Now, if you could literally just throw the meat of it down, like the case study. If you have someone rattle off, like, well, they came in, like maybe you get the sales rep in, you record a little session with him, and you get the little transcript of like, what was the problem they were coming in for? What was the solution? How do we arrive at that topic? Like you could probably even take the sales calls and be like, hey, come up with a case study based on this, and then talk to customer service later who maybe got some data points on how well they're doing now, and then give AI that starting point in order to come up with a case study. Now, if you're going to do case studies really well, you might go and talk to that customer with questions and kind of do a quick interview in order to unpack it. But then you can unpack that interview, pop it into AI, and be like, "Hey, using this template, it's always good to give an example. Come up with a case study based on the transcript of this story, this template." Come up with a case study that looks like this, and it will execute it and put together a pretty dang good starting point for that story. Whether it's a case study, again, stories from customers, you can take reviews and pop it into AI and ask for stories, or ask it to come up with illustrations that you could pop into your website, little simple stories, right? Because we're all trying to figure out how to sell often a SaaS tool needs little stories so people can visualize what it's like to use the tool. You're talking about the feature, but if you take some of your feedback from reviews, you can then have AI going based on those reviews, play the little stories you need throughout your website in order to tell a more engaging, overarching story about how this tool can be used by the team. And it can even do creative things. But before I get into some of the more creative things, that I've done with marketing and AI now. I'll see if you have any questions about those little turning case studies into stories.
Yeah, what's interesting to me too is when you're talking about those things is what happens to the writers, right? I mean, you still need to be an editor. You still need to know the topic. When you were mentioning the example of I'm not a Casey Neistat or whoever the person that was doing it,
Yeah.
but they never even followed anybody who does that kind of thing, and then they wrote about it. I'm in the market research industry, right? I'm not a market researcher, but I write about it all the time. I
Yep.
work with market research companies, so I know the industry better than somebody who wouldn't be in it. But how do people adjust their skills? I personally think it's great, right? Like I get the content, and then I'll get it into submission, basically, one way or another. But what are the skills that people have to actually make this work? And how do you know? And how dependent can you be on one tool? What if Claude AI goes out of business, or ChatGPT shuts down? I know they're not owned by Google, but like we've seen that
Yep.
happen.
I think these models are they're pretty close to each other. And if ChatGPT stopped existing, I'd be like, okay, I'd go set up a Claude account, take my same payment, go pay it to Claude. And instead of having custom GPTs, or what I think you call it artifacts, right? It's their custom GPTs where you can load it in with custom instructions and stuff. I could do
Yep.
the same thing with Google. Like not all the companies won't die, and they all work generally the same. There are nuances between them, but like generally, it's like learning. I don't know. It's not even like learning instruments. It'd be like jumping from I don't know. Maybe this isn't a fair comparison, 'cause I don't play these instruments, but jumping from like a violin to a viola, like they're pretty similar, and a lot of the skill sets will carry over. I think what professionals need to focus on now, especially writers, is learning how to leverage the tool, because you're going to know better how to leverage it. Kind of like we did, even in graphic designers are facing the same problem, because it's getting easier and easier with things like AI powered tools and Canva and like Midjourney to come up with illustrations and design faster, for non-designers. Um, the cool thing is designers and writers have a better vocabulary in order to prompt AI to get better results out of it faster. So the ones who embrace the tool sooner will be able to get ahead, because they'll be able to do more work better and faster than normal people will, because they'll know the words for the style that they want. A client will have a specific need, but they won't know how to say it, and a client's like, "Oh, you're looking for this," which in design happens all the time. They're like, "I want it to pop more." You're like, okay, as a designer, I'd have to now unpack that. What do you mean pop more? Oh, they want it to be brighter colors. Why? Oh, so that when they're in the wall of all their competitors, which are generally blue, like navy blue and banking, they want to stand out. So it doesn't necessarily need to be bright pink, but we need to stand out from navy blue. Writers have the same ability to understand what's actually needed versus what they think is needed. I will say the AI is getting better at interpreting what people actually want. And that's what we're starting to see with the O1 preview, is that I no longer, before, to turn a podcast transcript into 5 LinkedIn posts, it would take a heck of a prompt, like a mega prompt with instructions and examples and templates and formatting instructions on what to do. And it was loading it with too many emojis. And it was like what it thought a LinkedIn post needed was wrong. So I'd have to correct it with all these things, and even turn it into a chain prompt with like, okay, first do this, find the main ideas. After you find the main ideas, let's talk about what a good LinkedIn post looks like. Okay, let's start with post 1, post 2. Now with O1 preview, I can just give it the transcript and a 2-sentence prompt. And maybe it would help to have a little bit of my writing style, and its ability to hit it right the first time, much higher. And so if we continue on this trend, it is concerning. And so personally, I'm looking at it thinking like, well, if Sam Altman's right and 95% of marketing is completely done by AI 5 years from now, then that's a problem. That still leaves 5% probably running the AI machines. And I'm like, maybe I'll be one of those. Or I've always considered marketing to be a bit of a black hole. Have you ever noticed that you can never really spend enough in marketing, put enough people or talent or time into marketing? It can always take more. You can always put more money into marketing. And I'm like, maybe that black hole continues to exist, and even AI can't fill all the things that marketing could ever do. And we'll just have a different age of how we do things in marketing. It'll be very AI driven. I'm hoping for that future, not the one where a lot of us lose jobs, but I'm trying to be prepared for both by plowing headfirst into AI and trying to get more out of it as I can.
Yeah, I don't think we're all going to lose jobs, but I think it's going to change quite a bit, right? How do we do it? And it's what's interesting to me too is people have that discussion about, do you have to disclose when you use AI, right? And like, is it only when you write from scratch? Is it when you do this and this and this? And I'm thinking, I don't disclose what kind of keyboard I use. I don't disclose that I voice dictated my article. I don't disclose that I wrote it by hand and then typed it in after I edited it. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, at what point does it become just like that? And then when does it matter? I think it matters when it's completely wrong or when you're just kind of making up stuff, Like, I mean, I've had an article one
Yeah.
time
But
I asked it,
humans are wrong. You know what I'm saying? So it's
they
like,
are.
how do you draw the line in that either?
Well, I think I think the line is when it just makes up stuff. So like I was testing something the other day and I said I need some quotes in this or something. And there was these random people in this article. And I said, "Who are these people?" And it said they're completely fictional. I'm like, where did they come from? Just made them up, right? So very, very interesting. But what's the next step? So AI powered storytelling companies want to do it. How do they use it to align with the customer journey? I mean, so you got like the production, the creation, you got the maybe analysis, but how do you align it? Right time, right place, those buzzwords.
That's a really good question. I think, how do you align it to the customer journey? It's such a broad question. You're like, well, which part of the customer journey? Every part of the customer journey needs something different, and how you can use AI to solve it depends. So generally, where I find AI can be the most useful is looking at the bottleneck. What part of the customer journey is broken for your business? Which part is not resolved yet? You could probably start using AI to fix that bottleneck. But let's keep it on storytelling. Something that I'm experimenting with. This makes a lot of people really uncomfortable, but it's something that I'm pushing into harder, more and more often, because I think this is one of the most powerful parts of AI, is using AI to write custom content for hyper personalized content. If you want an example, it's on AI-drivenmarketer.com/course. It's a free course, and it will ask you 3 questions before you sign up for the course with your email. It'll ask you what your job title is, what market you're in, and who your buyer is. With those 3 pieces of information, I actually take the transcript video, because there's a video, 5 video lessons you'll get in a row on how to become better at AI, but it'll actually customize the lesson with action points specific to who you are, who you sell to, and what you're selling. So that a CMO selling beauty products to tweens is going to get a very different lesson than an email marketing specialist on the ground level of a B2B SaaS startup. You're going selling to maybe, I don't know, veterinarians. They're going to get a very different customized lesson because it's hyper personalized now. You could use that same mechanic for storytelling, right? If you knew just a few pieces of information, the AI's ability to at scale customize the emails, the text messages, or other owned media is now possible. You couldn't do it before. You could only mad lib your way through automation so much, but AI is creative and it can fill in those stories, especially if you give it very tight parameters and you test it with all kinds of different things. I'm not saying you just let it go and put it out there, because this is scary, but this is where we're going, is the ability to create hyper personalized stories. Imagine if an email sequence has a story and it's actually highlighting the case study in such a way that it's going to be tuned to a CMO versus a director of marketing, depending on who's in the sequence, right? That's a whole new level in order to actually engage people with on a way that only AI can do.
Very interesting. Of course, you can level that up and scale it up much quicker than me thinking about it. Hey, would this audience care about that at that point? Much, much easier. AI-driven marketer, connect with Dan. There you can sign up for his email list. Dan, nice to see you. Thanks for coming on, and we're out.
Woo! Thank you so much for listening to the AI Driven Marketer. If this show was any good, please give it a 5-star or whatever star rating you think it deserves on the podcast app that you're listening to, and tap that thumbs up button on YouTube. And if you want to dive deeper into AI and you're still not sure if you've mastered the fundamentals, go to my free AI course at AI-drivenmarketer.com and take a look. Learn the fundamentals, and you will never have to look for a prompt cheat sheet again. 5 video series, and you'll even find that I've customized the course so it's hyper personalized for you, your role, and the people you're marketing to. Take a look at it, and let's get started so we can do more with AI today.